Welcome to the Diamond Hands podcast, where medicine meets momentum and branding becomes a leadership system. I'm Tracey co-founder of Diamond Hands Media. I build aesthetic brands that lead, with a background in employee benefits and business finance, so brand becomes authority and asset value. This is mindset, money, and marketing for founders building brands that run without them. Because brand isn't a logo, it's how you lead.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Diamond Hands podcast. Today, we have a special treat for you guys. We have Josh DeBlasio with us. He actually has a consulting firm that consults with both aesthetic companies, skincare and injectables, and also aesthetic practices. You know, he deals in med spa, dermatology, plastic surgery. Josh is also the co-chair of the following aesthetic meetings. You know, you guys know these meetings: LAMCA, Med Spa Pro, Global Aesthetics Conference. And he's also a senior advisor for, 4 companies in the following specialties: private equity, fractional CFO, practice management, and EMR and EHR. So he is like the man of the hour. He has a long history in medical aesthetics. So you guys are in for a treat. So Josh, thank you. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you, Leslie. So good to be with you and so good to spend time with you in Beverly Hills at the meeting a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, it was
really
so
good
fun.
to be here.
Awesome. I love that. So, before we kind of get into the nuts and bolts of things, you have such a wide variety of experience. So if you could just kind of give us like the Cliff Notes version, Josh, of, how did you even get into aesthetics into the first place? What drew you to this industry? And not only what drew you to it, what has kept you here?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. So about 25 years ago, I started with Medicis, and a lot of people who've been around aesthetics for long enough know who Medicis is. At the time, Medicis only had prescription drugs for dermatologists. So antifungals, acne, rosacea, everything a dermatologist would write a prescription for. And then in 2004, when Restylane became available in North America, the company from Sweden said, what company is the most ingrained in dermatology? And that was Medicis. So Medicis got the rights to Restylane in 2004. So basically, I went from selling all the prescription drugs for Medicis. We then had 2 divisions: the prescription side, which was the medical derm side, and the aesthetic side, which was Restylane. So it's changed over, sold Restylane, did that for a while, and then was a regional manager for that company. And then when Dysport launched in 2010, really the way Medicis had things set up was if you really wanted to move up in the company, they wanted you to do a stint in the corporate office, which was in Scottsdale.
Yeah.
So my plan then, I said, okay, I'm going to go to Arizona, spend 2 years. It was an exciting time to launch Dysport. It was a great opportunity. And then I'll move back to Pittsburgh. Well, here it is 15 years later, and I'm still in Scottsdale. So my plan of being here two years didn't work out. But I was with Medicis, then Valiant purchased Medicis. And when Valiant purchased Medicis in 2012, they started a division called Business Consulting, where I was the head of that. And we had a team of consultants across the nation that went in and helped aesthetic practices run a more efficient business, a more profitable business. So that was great. And then I went over, there was a Stanford startup for a cloud-based EMR. And it was kind of ahead of its time. It was super cool, HIPAA compliant way to do online consults, almost a little too ahead of its time. If that would have hit during COVID, it would have been perfect. But then a really unique opportunity came across right here in Scottsdale, where PCA Skin was bought by private equity, and they were looking to really expand that company. They had never had a sales force, and I started with them in 15, and we went from no reps to, over the course of 5 years, up to around 80 reps.
Wow.
And we sold that about halfway through my tenure there to Colgate-Palmolive.
Yeah.
And that was the goal, was to grow that big enough to sell it. So I was there for a while. Then I ran another skincare company called Clarity.
Yep.
And then I would say about 2.5 years ago is, when I'd done it for 25 years almost at the time. And I said, you know what, I want to do my own thing. I had enough of kind of, reporting to boards and CEOs, and everything came down to who had the prettiest PowerPoint. And I just wanted to get a little more involved and do what I wanted. So that brings me to where I am today, where, you asked, why am I still in it? I think when you spend that much time in an industry, it's hard to cut the cord. And I am doing a lot outside the industry as well. And sometimes I say, if I was smart, I would just put all my efforts into what I'm doing outside the industry. But it's hard. I mean, you build relationships. It's such a great industry. You get to really know the key players like yourself in the space. I just put too much in it to just walk away totally. And the consulting portion of it, and having my hands in a bunch of different aspects on the aesthetic side, whether it's consulting with companies, consulting with practices, and going back to helping them run a better business. It's been really fun. So I think it's fun to have my hands in the industry and the corporate side and say, look, here's some of the things we did. Here's some things to think about. But again, also going in to a solo practice, whether they've been around 20 years or whether they're brand new, and helping them and getting them either set up for success or helping them get on the path to success, even if they've been around a while.
Yeah, and I
don't know if that was the Reader's Digest version. But.
No, I think it was great. And, I think one of the things that I'm thinking about, two things popped into my head. Like, number one is identity. So, thinking about why you stayed in it. So it's like so much of our identities are built in the communities that we give back to, right? And you've given so much of yourself to this industry. And there was a second thing, and my ADHD has taken it away from me, Josh.
But I think you make a good point, though, because, it's nice to, again, the meeting that we worked together in Beverly Hills, right? It's nice to go there with the goal of, how do we make this really impactful for the attendees?
Yes.
Rather than going up there with kind of another agenda or an ulterior motive and say, I really need the people in the crowd to buy what I'm selling. I'm not trying to sell anything but a good meeting. And if I attach my name to something now at this point in my career, I want it to be a really positive experience. And people could say, well, shouldn't that always be the case? Maybe. But I mean, when you're 23, you're going to sell whatever you're told to, and you got to make it work. And now that I'm old, I don't have to do that. And it's been really good. And, I think you probably saw that firsthand, that the goal is now provide a product that people say that was really good. It was non-biased and it was well done.
Exactly. And that's one of the reasons I do love LAMCA or have you. And so it came back to me. So with the company that you actually had been part of, in selling, an interesting word came to what you said. You said you guys planned for it. Like, you guys wanted the expansion. You guys did want that multiple of the EBITDA or have you, so that you can sell for the number you guys wanted.
Right.
So when you're working with practices, kind of going on into that, and that goes back to identity, bringing it back together, right?
Sure.
So it's like, how do you work with a practice to help them understand who their future identity is, so then they can work toward that? Because private equity could be one, or it could be they sell to a junior partner, or it could be they sell to another practice on the outside, or they just choose to leave, which happens too. So like, how do you help a practice owner plan for that future identity?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think it comes down to really what their goals are. And everyone's different. Like, a lot of people say, well, I know what their goals are, to sell and make a ton of money. Not everyone. I mean, it sounds like that's what it would be, but some people want to sell, make a lot of money, and walk away. Some people want to sell and stay. Some people want someone to come in and redo everything that they're doing. Others say, I want you to come in but not touch anything that I've done. So I think there's a lot of questions that you need to ask a practice, but I think the key is to get them thinking about where they want to be. And you hit the nail on the head. At PCA Skin, we knew what the goal was. The goal was to grow it to a point where it got sold, and we didn't really care who bought it, as long as it was a high dollar.
Yeah.
But when you look at practices, again, some feel like that, but a lot say, I do care who I sell it to. Because if it's someone who's going to come in and ruin this brand that I've built, if you built Leslie Tracy's aesthetics and you put your heart and soul into it and you built something great, you don't want someone to come in and just gut it. And I've been in acquisitions where I've seen that happen on the corporate side. So I think it's really finding out what is your goal, what do you want, and start thinking about it. And what I tell everyone, and I truly believe this, everyone should be having discussions. You gave a bunch of different examples right there. Do you sell it to a junior partner? Do you sell it to private equity? Do you partner with someone else? Do you acquire start thinking about it? And it's never too early. What happens a lot, and I think I mentioned this in Beverly Hills, when I talk to practices, they say, I'm not ready for that yet, but in 5 years, I want to have this conversation. And I'm thinking to myself, in 5 years, it's going to be too late.
Yes.
Because for a lot of reasons, whether they say I want to retire in 5 years, they definitely should start talking about it now. The market right now is hot. It's not going to be this hot in 5 years. No specialty holds on to that for that long. The other main reason I think is you should know, if it is a private equity discussion, what are they looking for? And start working today. Even if you don't want to do anything for 5 years, get on the right path now. So in 5 years, you say, look, I'm set up perfectly. If in 5 years you're like, oh, that's what you guys are looking for, and then you start, it's too late. It's like if I said I'm going to the beach in 5 years, I'll start working out then. It's like, no, start doing it now. I mean, you got to start getting ready, and everyone should be having the conversations with private equity. If nothing else, it's a good learning, and you also know what they're doing in the space. If nothing else, you should know, like, there's no better conversations you can have, in my opinion. And when someone says, well, how many should I talk to? As many as you can. As many as you can.
So you guys listen out there, if you're married, ladies, I just got to say, just like when you're dating for marriage, you're going to date a lot of them before you say, okay, I'm going
Great
to.
analogy.
And hopefully you're going to be in a good position where you are some hot toddy on the market. So then a lot of men are going to want to wipe you up. Right?
It's a great analogy. It really is. I've never thought about that analogy. It's great, though. If you said, well, I'm not going to start dating now. I want to get married in 5 years. What does it hurt to start having some conversations and getting your feelers out and figuring out what you don't and what you do and don't like? And I think it's a great analogy. I really do.
Yeah. So ladies, start dating now. And the few men who might be listening to this.
Yeah.
And so with that too, it's like if someone's talking to private equity, they're likely not ready to get a formal valuation done or what have you, or LOI. However, if you were to say 3 things that someone should do, say they're 5 or 6 years out from doing whatever thing they think that they want to do.
Yeah.
What would be the top 3 things that you should say they should do in order to be ready to have an actual proper conversation? Because you and I both know when the firm comes to a practice and says, here's the number, they want to give them the LOI, they know that's the lowest number that they could probably do, without the person getting upset, and the person could probably get more, but of course they're a bank. They don't want to do that. So what would you say are the top 3 things?
Well, I think it's understanding the terms and having you don't need to be an expert, but to have like a 101, 201 knowledge of these terms in private equity. Gross revenue. What's the difference between gross revenue and net revenue? What are COGS? What is EBITDA? All of these terms, it's kind of like you can't improve them if you don't even know what they are.
Yes.
And that's been the big eye opener to me. I've met people who have $3 million businesses, but what is that? Is that 3 million top line, or is that bottom line? I don't.
Yes.
And the thing is you don't know until you ask, because everyone has a different idea. If I said, how big's your business? It's like, well, what do you mean? Is that top line, bottom line, gross revenue, net, EBITDA? So I think to answer your question, you have to know what those terms are. And kind of part A and part B of that, you have to know what they're looking for. And
Yeah.
that's why I said you should talk to them now to know what they're looking for, right? And then when you know what they're looking for, know what those terms are. I think the other thing is diversifying the practice in both number of providers. Most private equity is going to want to see multiple providers, because if
Yes.
all of the eggs are in one basket of one provider and God forbid something happens,
Mm.
that really hurts the entire practice.
Yes.
So, if it were just you and you're a plastic surgeon and you're doing it all, what happens if something happens to you? The other thing is diversifying the treatments. And I think most PE, now every PE is different, but a lot of PE wants to see diversified treatments. They don't want to see you doing, let's not say plastic surgeon, let's say you have a med spa and you do 100% injectables. You're the filler and neurotoxin queen. What if something happens? And again, people say, well, that's never going to happen. No one ever thought something like COVID would happen.
Yeah.
So, let's say neurotoxin, there's a string of 3 deaths in a row and they pull all neurotoxin. Well, that's really going to hurt your business. Now, if you're doing filler, laser, peels, weight loss, sexual health, now you have a very diversified business. So it's the same reason not to put all your eggs in one basket with one provider is why you shouldn't put all of them in one different, not one different, but one treatment option as well. So I think
Yeah.
that's really important. And then there's a lot of like little things like reputation.
Yeah.
If it's a private equity company that's going to want you to stay and continue to work with you,
Yeah.
the ones who are really worth something, even if you're really profitable, but if you're not easy to work with and you're not likable and you don't have a good reputation, the best PE companies are going to say, we'll pass because we'll find someone as good as you are on paper with also a great demeanor and reputation. So there's a lot of little intangibles like that as well that I think are really important. But I also think it's important, and this is the last one I'll say when you ask me. I think I already named 3, but do you want to stay on? There are some people who
Yeah.
say, I want to sell and retire. And there are people who say, I'm 45. I don't want to retire. And there's great PE options for both of them. Now, the
Yeah.
person wanting to retire, they're not going to get as much because it's basically a PE company. So you're going to retire anyways. If we give you 200 grand and you want to retire by next month, that's 200 grand more than you were going to get.
Yeah.
The one who's 45 and says, I got 20 years left in me, then you're introducing all kind of things about, well, is this going to be a good long-term partner? If I get equity, what does that mean? Is that equity going to be worth anything? What's the history of that equity? And there's so many new PE companies entering our space.
It's crazy.
They're coming out of the woodwork.
Whew.
And, if they say, well, we'll give you equity. Well, a lot of people say, well, equity doesn't, who knows if that's ever going to be worth something. The good private equity companies, it is going to be worth something. And they should be able to say to you, here's a history of our private equity and other specialties and what it's done.
So basically, you have some really great points. So guys, just so we can summarize them, diversify. Make sure you're diversifying your team and your services. Number 2, make sure you have a good reputation and you're not an a-hole. Number 3, basically having knowledge of the terms in private equity is going to be really important for you. And lastly, understand if you want to stay on or if you want to get out of Dodge,
Yep.
as
sure.
soon as the acquisition is complete, if private equity is the way that you're going to go. So with that, Josh, going into how you actually build, a profitable practice, I just have a few questions that I want to kind of get into. Sales is like a dirty word for so much of, the aesthetics world. And a lot of people, when they're trying to compete, they price themselves too low, even though they have all these qualifications. So in your opinion, do you feel that most aesthetic practices are pricing themselves too low out of fear, or from what you see, or are they pricing too high without enough differentiation? Because at the end of the day, most people could do the same thing.
Yeah, it's the $1 million question. And I've seen both. I've seen more of the former than the latter.
Mm.
I think it's tough because, the market is becoming more and more commoditized. I mean,
Yeah.
when I sold Restylane, I covered three. I mean, I didn't cover LA, San Francisco, and Vegas, but I had Pittsburgh,
Mm.
Cleveland, Columbus. Okay. So three kind of
Mm.
Midwest towns. And there were 4 med spas out of those 3 cities. Now there's
Mm.
probably 60 in each, I'm guessing, maybe more. I probably had 80 accounts total out of those 3 markets. Now, if you looked at everyone who bought filler and neurotoxin, it's probably 500, probably more in those 3 cities, probably closer to 6,
Yeah.
700. So my point in there is it's become so commoditized that people start to compete on price, which adds
Mm.
to the market becoming commoditized. So it's interesting. There's way too much emphasis put on price and not enough on outcomes. And there's way too
Mhm.
much emphasis put on how do I get new patients in the door rather than
Mhm.
taking care of the ones that you have. And I've always said
Mm.
if you take care of the ones that you have, that business is going to snowball organically because people are going
Yes.
to tell their friends. They're going to come
Mm.
back to you for other things. They're not going to one, you want them to come back for the same thing that they got. And that's the
Yeah.
great thing about non-surgical aesthetics. Just about everything is repeat business. So if you can get
Yes.
them back for what they already had done again, odds
Mhm.
are they're going to add other things because they're going to say, I know you've been doing my lips. Tell me about
Mhm.
this new laser that you have. My
Mhm.
skin's not perfect. Tell me about that. Tell me about this weight loss stuff you're doing, whatever. So
Mhm.
I just think if they would focus on that. Now, the price thing, I think where a lot of people have trouble, they forget that this is medicine. And we
Yeah.
talked a little bit about this in LA. In no other specialty do they say, well, this is what you need, but maybe we just go less and you can always come back if you like it. And I always use the example of if you have strep throat, you go to a primary care doctor, he doesn't say, okay, you need a Z pack. But
Yeah.
you know what? A Z pack's like $200 now. Let's give you 2 days of the Zithromax,
Mhm.
see how
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
do. And then you can always come back for more. You'd be like, I came here for you to fix a problem.
Yeah.
I didn't ask about price. I'm sick. I need this fixed, right? And people forget that aesthetic medicine is medicine. And I think
Yes.
it's really important to say this is what you need. And this is a pet peeve of mine. People say don't look at it as sales because you mentioned sales. Look at it as, and everyone in the room says education. I don't really like that because to me,
Why?
I don't want to be educated. If I go with strep throat, I don't need the history of a Z pack and the history of bacteria and staph. I want you to say, here's what you need to fix your problem.
To that part.
You know,
But how many people are doing that
I
though?
don't,
And that's the $1,000,000 question.
yeah, I don't
The
see it
aesthetic
enough.
consult.
I don't see it
Yeah.
enough where I think if people said, here's what you're presenting with, I
Mhm.
can
Mhm.
fix that to a pretty good degree. You're not going to say I can eliminate it, but if you look at these
Mhm. Mhm.
before and
Mhm.
afters, you still see a little bit of the line, but look how much
Mhm.
better
Mhm.
it is,
Mhm.
or you
Mhm.
still see a little bit. And but I can help with that. And this is what it's
Mhm.
going to take. I could go
Mhm.
less, but you're not going to be happy. And that's the killer. I think too many aesthetic practitioners say, I'm going to go a little bit less than they need. You can always come back for more. Well, someone goes home. Okay, so let's say they needed 50 units and you gave them 25. They go
Mhm.
home. They say, I just took a half day off work. I canceled dinner
Mm.
tonight because I wasn't sure what I would look like. So I'm not going to do
Mhm.
dinner tonight with my friends. And then they don't notice a difference. Why would they
Damn.
why would they all of a sudden say, you know what? I'm ready to take another half day off work, do this all again, sit in the waiting room for 20 minutes, get numb, do whatever for something that didn't really work the first time. It kills the practice because when someone says, hey, did you go to so and so? Yeah, I went. I didn't see a big difference. They don't say, I didn't see a big difference, but they did give me a full explanation that they were giving me less than I need and I could always come back for more. They lose all of that. So I just think,
Yeah.
like any other medical specialty, you got to treat them to what they need and not let
Mhm.
them get less than what they need and hope they come back.
Yeah. And with that, I know that, forever we've been using the term medical spa
Hmm.
or now it's even shortened. We say med
Yeah.
spa. However, it just kind of going off a limb, if you could rename med spas to something else, what would you name it in order to kind of give it more gravitas, if you
Yeah,
will?
it was funny. One of the few med spas that I worked at, that I sold to back in the early
Mhm, mhm.
2000s, they named theirs. It was the doctor's name, Ann Therese
Mhm.
Aesthetic Medicine, and this was back 20 years ago.
Mm.
And I think aesthetic medicine has a much more. I think they were brilliant to name it that because it has a
Mhm,
much
mhm.
more gravitas than med spa. Again,
Mhm.
everything's med spa, even the conferences are med spa, right?
Yeah.
But med spa makes you think like you can go in, you can get a massage, you can get your toes done, you can get a
Mhm.
blowout. They're also doing Botox over there. That's what I think. But I mean, who am I? I'm a middle-aged guy,
Perception.
It to me it is. But when I hear
Mhm,
aesthetic medicine, I don't
mhm.
think all of that other stuff.
Yeah,
So
it's so
I don't know.
true.
It's funny. I've never been asked that. I think it's a really good question. And when
Mhm,
you were first asking that, I was like, I don't know. But then I think about how that practice named it 20 years ago. And I
mhm,
think
mhm.
calling it something aesthetic medicine carries more medical weight than med spa.
Yeah, so instead of like flute med spa, be flute aesthetic medical center
Yeah,
or something
exactly.
like that.
Medical center,
So then
exactly.
people associate it with, okay, I have this challenge, which are whatever it's like hollowing or whatever it is, and I'm gonna go there and I'm likely going to get it treated
Totally.
and fixed
Totally.
instead of, oh, I'm gonna go and like I see all these girls are gonna give me champagne and bubble bubble. It's just like,
Exactly.
and there's so much of that perception that has come into the industry, and I'm guilty of it
Yeah.
too. Helping people to perpetuate that type of image or whatever. But
And it goes back to what you had talked about earlier with pricing,
mm-mm,
because a lot of the companies that I've worked for too, it's like, all right, what's our promotion? And it's like, no other medical company is offering promotions to their practitioners,
yeah,
and no other practitioners are offering specials or promos to their patients. Now, again,
yeah,
people could say, well, it's different, but I was always under the thing with PCA and some of these other companies I work for, don't fall into this trap of what's our special this month. Again,
mm,
antibiotic companies don't say we have a special this month. They
no,
say, here's what we're providing to fix the problem that your patients come with, and here's why you should use it. When you get into all
mhm,
these specials on both sides, company to practitioner, practitioner to patient, it
mhm.
cheapens it, in my opinion. I
Yeah, that
think
makes
there's
sense.
things you can do to combine it and say, like,
Yeah,
if you buy 4 syringes, you get something.
hmm,
Because
hmm.
it's always the devil's in the detail. Well, why? Well, because if you come in and you need 4 syringes, we don't want you walking out with 1. We wanna make it worth your
Yes.
while to get the 4, and we're gonna give you this hyaluronic acid serum for free,
Hmm.
because there, you're attacking the wrinkle intradermally with what I'm gonna inject. You're also
Hmm.
attacking it topically with the hyaluronic acid. There's a reason rather than get 4 syringes and pick anything for free off the shelf. That's very, like, Ulta Sephora-ish to me.
Yes, it's very Ulta.
Yeah.
And and the last thing I want to say on that. So obviously, treatment planning is very important. As you kind of talked about, like saying this is what will correct you. Whether they take it because it is elective, whether they take it or not is another thing. However, as long as we are saying what is the best thing for the patient, what will give them the best outcome, that's
100%.
what we're looking for. So, like and it's the last question, I promise.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I do have to ask your take on this because some of these bigger chain practices or chain medical aesthetic centers, and
Yeah.
we're going to start calling it that,
Yeah.
they actually have someone who's non medical, closing these high ticket packages or what have you. So it'll be someone who has no medical training or anything, and they're sitting down with the patient and saying, okay, this, that, this, that, this is what you need. And they're getting a commission off of it.
Yep.
So what is your take on that and the ethics of that?
I think if they're doing it in an ethical way and they're doing it in an educated way, and to the point you just said, if they're doing it with the patient's best outcome in mind, it's hard for me to give a blanket and say, oh, that it's terrible, because maybe that's better than a doctor who goes in and says, I have 15 seconds, just give me 2 syringes, I'm going to put them in and get out of here because I'm busy.
Yeah.
Maybe this is better because it's sitting and listening to the patient. Again, the devil's in the details. If they're doing it right in the right way, which is a big if, but it makes me think about this. I keep going back to 20 years ago. There were a lot of plastic surgeons and dermatologists who said, I can't believe nurses are injecting. So-and-so hired a nurse. That's absurd. And then they would go in, they'd do a terrible job. I'd watch them. Not all, but like I'd see the guy who just said that. And there's no pain management. It's one syringe. The patient's in pain. They look awful. And then we walk out and I'm like, so what do you think? And it's like, I don't know. I hate doing this. I'm a surgeon. I don't want to be doing this. And it's like, well, it'd be better to have a nurse this is all they do and they take a lot of pride in it, rather than you going in there because you can tell you hate doing it. You know what I mean? It's very clear you hate doing it.
Yeah.
That patient is very clear you hate doing it. And that could have been a facelift patient in 4 years. And guess what? She says, if that surgeon can't do one syringe correctly, I'm certainly not coming back here for a $20,000 facelift. But to the person doing the consult, I can't say, oh, it's a terrible idea, because they might be really good and the patients might love them and they might spend more time in the education phase. Then it just depends. I don't know. What's your thought on that?
Well, I mean, I think because I used to be in ophthalmology like 15 years ago or whatever. And so, of course, we were selling all the things. It's just like we got incentivized, obviously. So on one end, I do think that it could be a good idea for someone to take control of that process as like an official patient care coordinator. But at the same time, it's just like, how do they know it's the best thing for that patient's skin, that patient's history, and all those types of things, unless they're saying, okay, I'm going to put this together. This might give you the best result. And of course, the doctor has to co-sign on it. But like, I just wonder how it affects patient perception if they say, this is that, and the doctor comes in or the nurse practitioner and says, oh, actually, based on your history, this actually is not going to be good. Like, how do they kind of like, because without medical knowledge of the person's skin and their pre-existing conditions, how can a non-medical person really make that assessment?
I think it's a great point. I think it goes back to like, how educated are they? What are their motivations? If it's just to drive up the sale for that day, rather than build loyal clients and get them referring friends and coming back, it's super short-sighted. So in your position, I'm just curious, what were you selling then for the ophthalmologist? What were you wanting them to buy?
Oh, it was just prescription glasses.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so you had like a store on site.
Exactly. Yep. So basically they'd come out, the doctor would say, here's their, prescription. And they'd be like, oh, they need like bifocals or something. But then when you have that, you have this whole thing. They could do progressives back in the day, or, the still thing, or they can do lenses that, transition that turn different color when they go outside. So it's like, of course, like our goal was to basically have them get the best of the lenses, and it was obviously, even though we know the cost, and it's like, wow, this is a ripoff, but that's what we would do. And so they would kind of give us a framework, but then what they can get based on the framework. So I guess it comes down to like the medical person giving a framework, and then the person could work off of that. But sometimes I do see this person going in before the medical person comes in. Maybe it should be the medical person does the thing first. They have a framework, and then they could do a consult as, do you want to do this entire treatment plan after, once they give the framework? But it still takes time.
And you made a great point about the oversight. Like, I think like anything, it should have an extra set of eyes checking it. And those
Mhm,
extra
mhm.
set of eyes shouldn't be focused on revenue only. And
Yeah.
again, that's what I think, going back to 20 minutes ago, I think is one of the biggest mistakes that practices make. Everyone focuses, like I said, on how do I get new patients and make more money off of
Mhm,
them
mhm.
rather than how do I get them to keep coming back and coming back. Because
Yes.
I think if people put as much effort, if not more, into that versus
Mhm.
advertising and all the stuff you need to do, SEO and digital marketing and any types of
Mhm.
marketing to get them in, if they spent that much effort getting people back, I just think
Mm.
practices would change. I always say it's not sexy though. Like if I say, let's talk about if I did a talk at one of these meetings, I guarantee you I'll get you 50 new patients. It would be standing room only.
Of
If I did a
course.
talk, how to get your patients to come back,
Mhm, mhm.
I have 12 people in the room.
Yeah, I mean, because people take for granted. My parents are Jamaican, and my mom would sometimes say, she was like, two birds in the
Yep.
hand are worth more than, or one bird in the hand is worth more than two in the
Yep.
bush, right? And that's the thing. It's just like what we have, continue to cultivate them and grow them and nurture them, that can have a bigger return than going after something new, which you don't know. And yes, still do it, obviously. However, and going back to that, and this is the last thing we'll close on
Yep.
too, and you could like add your sauce, but I mean, it's just like two, along with that goes team retention, team culture,
Yes.
all of those things. Because if people are seeing a revolving door
Yes.
of people coming in and out of your damn practice, they're not going to trust you anymore because they're like, ooh, something's going on in their practice. Why these good people that I loved are not staying. So yeah. So, I mean,
Hmm.
for leaders, I would say focus on yourself, please. Make sure you have a good life. You're taking care of yourself. You're not,
Yep.
and then focus on your team next. And then the team will take care of the
Yep.
people.
You're so right. And that's another thing. If the P company is good, they'll
Hmm,
look at
hmm.
turnover too,
Yeah.
because they don't want to practice because there's usually a little bit of an underlying issue. But that's the biggest challenge now. I mean,
Hmm,
loyalty
hmm.
for companies, loyalty for practices, it's
Hmm.
really, really tough now, and I don't think anyone's mastered how do you keep your employees. You hear everything from just pay them more to build
Hmm.
a culture that it's not about paying them more. I
Hmm,
just don't
hmm.
think anyone's really I think it comes down to the person you hire more than
Yeah.
what you can do, and it's like, well, that sucks because what if that means I can't do anything? There's things you can do, but is there a guarantee? No. People are just loyal or they're not. And I think it's really, really hard.
Yeah, it definitely is hard, but that's another podcast
That's another
episode,
one. That's
guys.
another one.
Might have to bring you back to talk about just
Yeah,
team retention.
for sure.
Oh my God. Well, guys, this is such a treat. Josh, thank you
Aw,
so
thank you.
much for your time and like speaking to our listeners. And I'll link all your information in the show notes. I know you're a busy guy, so you're probably not going to get them. Try.
No, listen, it's a pleasure, and it's always I always learn a lot when I spend time with you, whether
Yeah.
it's in a situation like this or when you're at one of your lectures. I always make sure not to miss them. So it's really good to
Oh,
see you
thank
again.
you. You too. Well, we will talk soon.
All right. Thank
Thank
you so
you.
much. Have
Until
a
next
good one.
time, guys.
All
You
right.
too.
Take care.
Want more clarity like this? Join the Branded Practice newsletter community. I write about strategy, systems, and brand leadership straight to your inbox. Go to diamondhandsmedia.com to sign up. And if this episode hit, share it with someone still building without a brand. This is the Diamond Hands Podcast. Thanks for listening. Now go lead.